In 1902, Nikola Tesla built a tower capable of transmitting electricity through the air. No wires, no meters, no billing. 3 decades later, that same tower was demolished under mysterious circumstances. Tesla died poor, alone, in a hotel room, while his documents vanished before his body even got cold. But that was not the first time free energy was suppressed, and it was definitely not the last. What I'm about to reveal is not conspiracy theory. These are documents, patents, letters, and testimonies that were buried in dusty archives, waiting for someone to connect the dots. Because in the 19th century, while the world celebrated the Industrial Revolution as progress, a silent war was being fought behind the scenes. Not with weapons, but with money, influence, and the systematic suppression of any technology that threatened to turn energy into something abundant and free. Have you ever wondered why we pay for something that is literally everywhere? Why electricity, something that can be drawn from the Earth's own magnetic field, must pass through meters, monthly bills, and corporate monopolies? The answer is not in the physics books you studied at school. It's in the documents that never reached you. Today, you're going to uncover how visionary inventors were systematically silenced, their patents bought and buried, their laboratories burned, their reputations destroyed, and more importantly, you're going to understand why. Before we talk about Tesla, we need to go back a few decades, because the suppression of free energy did not begin in the 20th century. It began the moment someone realized that free energy meant decentralized power, and decentralized power was a deadly threat to those profiting from monopolies. At the end of the 19th century, one name began circulating intensely among industrialists: John Worrell Keely. In 1872 in Philadelphia, he presented to the public something he described as an etheric motor, a machine that extracted energy from an invisible substance that, according to him, permeated all matter, the ether. The idea seemed absurd to traditional physics, but the demonstrations captured the attention of powerful people. Keely held presentations in front of engineers, investors, and reporters, and the accounts are hard to ignore. Witnesses claim to have seen metal spheres levitating with no apparent support, machines running for long periods with no steam, coal, or electricity, and metal structures breaking or being altered using only specific sound frequencies. He said he needed no fuel because he worked with vibrations capable of activating invisible forces present in all matter. The impact was so great that Keely raised large sums of capital, mainly from investors interested in replacing steam locomotives, powering factories without coal, creating combustion-free ships, and even developing fuel-less vehicles for land and air transport. But there was a pattern. Keely never disclosed all the technical details. He claimed the world was not ready yet, and premature revelations could turn his discovery into a weapon or a tool of domination for governments and oligopolies. He built extremely precise acoustic instruments, some based on liquid columns, crystals, and metal cavities, using calibrated frequencies to alter the behavior of matter. From this perspective, he claimed atoms were not solid particles, but vibrational patterns within an invisible medium. If the right frequency were mastered, it would be possible to move, break, or reorganize material structure. Reports from that time describe phenomena of molecular disintegration using sound, like metal tubes being split or weakened without any physical force applied. Keely said all matter was held together by vibration, and that by adjusting the right frequency, it could be manipulated directly. But the pressure against him kept growing. While traditional scientists accused him of fraud without even examining his devices up close, some respected figures, like William Crookes and Oliver Lodge, observed his work with serious curiosity. Even so, public hostility and academic distrust did not stop him from attracting capital, especially from investors tied to the railroad industry and the military. Keely's downfall came from the friction between promise and secrecy. Investors began demanding machines ready for industrial-scale application, newspapers tied to coal and oil attacked him as a fraud, and the scientific community refused any evaluation that strayed from established paradigms. When Keely died in 1898, his laboratory was quickly dismantled, many of his devices vanished, and technical documents disappeared. Some equipment was seized by the United States Army, which raised even more suspicion. Today, looking at his records, it is possible to see that he was working with concepts reminiscent of modern phenomena such as mechanical resonance, acoustic levitation, piezoelectricity, and even ideas linked to zero-point energy. Keely's problem was not technical, it was political. When his investors demanded he hand over the technology for mass replication, Keely refused, claiming humanity was not ready for such power. Keely Motor Company records show a series of increasingly aggressive offers to buy the technology outright, followed by coordinated lawsuits that financially destroyed the inventor. Keely died in 1898, ruined. His equipment was confiscated and never seen again. The official narrative labeled him an illusionist, but the witnesses, the enormous investments, the destruction of his laboratories, and the disappearance of his prototypes suggest something far more complex. Keely may have been one of the first to touch a knowledge that could not circulate freely without shaking the economic and scientific structures that were being consolidated. Nathan Stubblefield demonstrated wireless energy transmission in 1902, a year before Tesla. He transmitted voice and energy without wires in Moray, Kentucky, in front of hundreds of witnesses. Local newspapers covered the event. But when Stubblefield refused to sell his patent to the growing telephone industry, he was found dead of starvation on his property in 1928, completely forgotten by the world. The Hermetic principle, as above, so below, tells us that small-scale patterns reflect large-scale ones. What happened to these inventors individually was happening systemically to an entire line of technological development. Energy was being centralized, not because it was the only efficient way, but because it was the only controllable way. Thomas Moray, already in the 20th century but developing technology conceived in the 19th, managed to extract radiant energy directly from the vacuum in 1925. He demonstrated devices producing up to 50,000 watts, with no apparent connection to any external source. FBI documents, declassified decades later, show that Moray was systematically investigated, had his laboratory raided multiple times, and survived an assassination attempt in 1940. His technology was never commercialized. The question is not whether these men were misunderstood geniuses or sophisticated fraudsters. The question is the pattern, because while hundreds of patents for combustion engines, conventional generators, and centralized electrical distribution systems were approved and financed, any patent that suggested ambient energy, ether energy, or lossless wireless transmission was either rejected or approved and then bought by companies that never produced it. Wilhelm Reich observed in 1940 that whenever you find systematic suppression of information, you've found something true and threatening. Suppression doesn't waste energy on lies. It spends energy on inconvenient truths. You really need to grasp what was at stake. In 1882, Thomas Edison inaugurated the first commercial power plant on Pearl Street in New York. It was not a technological breakthrough. It was a business model. Edison wasn't selling electricity. He was selling dependency. Edison's direct current system required power stations every mile. That meant massive infrastructure, centralized investment, and absolute control over distribution. Every customer was a meter. Every meter was predictable revenue. Every city that wanted light had to negotiate with Edison's monopoly, and he had ensured it would be that way through aggressively defended patents and exclusive contracts with municipal governments. Thomas Edison had built his reputation and his investments on direct current, DC. For that system to work, a generating station was needed every few blocks. Since DC lost power quickly with distance, that meant dense infrastructure, local contracts, and tight control of distribution, the exact kind of centralized model big industrialists loved. Edison wasn't just an inventor, he was an aggressive businessman. He maintained agreements with banks, politicians, and shareholders who expected returns on the DC-based system. Any alternative meant not just competition, but the risk that billions in infrastructure and licenses would become obsolete. George Westinghouse, a visionary industrialist, saw the potential of alternating current AC. With transformers, it was possible to step up voltage, transmit energy over long distances, and step it down again before consumption. That made everything cheaper. Fewer stations, less maintenance, greater reach. It was the opposite of Edison's rigid model. When Westinghouse began investing in AC, Edison didn't see it as a technical disagreement. He saw it as an economic and political threat. Edison knew he wouldn't win through technical argument, so he turned to emotional manipulation. He started public demonstrations electrocuting animals with alternating current. He hired a specialist named Harold P. Brown to perform these executions, pretending the idea was not his. Dogs, cats, horses, all killed in front of audiences to prove AC was deadly. The most shocking episode happened in 1903 with Topsy the elephant at Coney Island Amusement Park. She was hanged and electrocuted with 6,600 volts of alternating current in front of hundreds of people, while cameras filmed everything. The event was presented as an educational act to protect the population, but the goal was psychological. Associate AC with fear. Edison went further. He supported the use of alternating current in the creation of the first electric chair, saying it would be a more humane way to execute criminals. But behind the scenes, he encouraged the word used to be Westinghoused to turn the rival's name into a synonym for electrocution. He wasn't just undermining the technology, he was attacking its moral legitimacy, linking it to horror and death. The central point is that Edison wasn't just fighting Westinghouse, he was fighting decentralization. Alternating current meant fewer stations, fewer obligatory contracts, less corporate dependence. Electricity could become a more accessible, scalable, and pluralized service, something that would strip power from banks and monopolies. The real debate wasn't technical, it was political and economic. It was about control, and in the middle of this conflict, someone emerged who could destroy the entire dispute: Nikola Tesla. Tesla didn't dream of electricity only as a paid service, but as an invisible field capable of powering the whole planet. He entered history by offering Westinghouse a complete alternating current system, far more efficient than anything that existed. He provided the foundation of the motors, generators, and transformers that allowed AC to defeat DC. Tesla didn't just want to replace wires with antennas. He believed that the Earth and the atmosphere themselves could function as a gigantic natural electrical transmission system. To do that, he planned to build transmitting towers spread across the world. The most famous one was the Wardenclyffe Tower in New York. To understand this in the simplest way possible, imagine that the entire Earth would work like a giant battery. The transmitting tower functioned like a kind of energy injector. Its base went deep into the ground, directly connected to the Earth. When he applied electrical pulses there, that energy would spread through the underground layers, but that was only half of the equation. At the other end, the tower was also connected to the sky. Above the regular atmosphere, there is the ionosphere, a layer full of electrically charged particles. The tower would serve as a bridge between the ground and this upper layer. Each electrical pulse emitted by the tower would be transmitted simultaneously through the Earth's crust below and the ionosphere above, like two parallel pathways through which the energy would travel. With this system active, electricity wouldn't travel through cables, but through the environment itself. Anyone, anywhere on the planet, could capture that energy if they had a proper receiver. This receiver would be an antenna connected to the air combined with a link to the ground. Not very different from how a radio picks up sound waves from the air, but adapted for electricity. When the device made contact with those pulses scattered through the atmosphere and completed the circuit with the ground, the energy would be converted and used to light lamps, move machines, or power entire cities. The logic behind it is straightforward. If radio can send voice through the air, and if wireless telegraphy sends signals through the environment, then electricity can also be transmitted without cables. The Earth's crust would act as the return wire, and the ionosphere as the outgoing wire. It's as if the Earth were a giant battery, and every human being had the right to plug their device into it. They would just need a receiver. This vision made it clear why Tesla scared so many powerful people. If energy could be pulled from the air like radio signals, there would be no way to sell kilowatt hours, measure consumption, or monopolize distribution. Energy would be available in the environment the same way oxygen is. For Tesla, electricity was like the wind. No one created it, no one should own it. He only wanted to show how to tap into it and use it. That was what made the project so dangerous to the corporate logic of the time, and so revolutionary for the rest of the world. For Edison and other barons of the era, this was unacceptable. There was no way to monetize something that did not pass through cables, meters, and licenses. The war officially ended when AC won the contract to light the 1893 World's Fair in Chicago, and soon after, to transmit power from Niagara Falls to Buffalo, 40 kilometers away. This toppled Edison's main argument that alternating current was impractical, expensive, and dangerous. But a victory of that magnitude had a price. Tesla's boldest ideas began to be silenced. He was a genius who understood something fundamental. Energy does not need to be generated. It needs to be converted. Planet Earth, suspended in an ocean of electromagnetic ether, is essentially a giant capacitor constantly recharged by solar radiation, cosmic rays, and its own dynamic magnetic field. Tesla realized you do not need to burn coal to create electricity. You only need to know how to extract and convert the energy that is already present. In 1891, Tesla demonstrated wireless transmission of energy by lighting lamps without wires several meters away. In 1899, in Colorado Springs, he transmitted enough energy to light 200 lamps at 26 miles away without wires. His diaries from that period describe resonance with the Earth's own ionosphere, using the planet as a natural conductor. Here the story gets more interesting. J.P. Morgan, the richest man in America at the time, financed Tesla to build Wardenclyffe Tower in 1901. The official project was transatlantic wireless communication, but letters between Tesla and Morgan reveal something different. Tesla was building a global system for transmitting free energy. Anyone with a simple receiver could draw electricity from the air, anywhere on the planet, with no costs after the initial investment in the receiver. Morgan grasped the implication immediately. No meters, no billing. How to monetize something that is literally in the air. How to maintain a monopoly over something that anyone with basic knowledge could access. The response was brutal and direct. Destroy the project before it worked. In 1906, Morgan cut all funding. Tesla spent the following years desperately seeking other investors, but the doors were closed. Not because the technology did not work. Morgan's own scientists had confirmed that it worked, but because it worked too well. It worked in a way that made it impossible to control access. Wardenclyffe Tower was demolished in 1917, officially sold as scrap to pay debts. But government documents declassified in 1980 show that federal agents seized all of Tesla's technical papers, classifying them as a threat to national security. Understand this. Control over energy is not about efficiency or technology. It is about keeping humanity dependent on a system that can be built, regulated, and controlled. Herbert Hoover, before becoming president, worked as a mining engineer and wrote extensively about resource management. But his private papers reveal something more sinister. The belief that abundant resources create social instability, that people with unlimited access to energy become difficult to govern, that artificial scarcity is not only economically advantageous, it is politically necessary. This is the real conspiracy. It was not about hiding technology because it did not work. It was about hiding technology because it worked too well. It was about keeping humanity locked into a system of artificial scarcity. But the suppression of free energy in the 19th century was not only a matter of economics and politics, it was also an esoteric war, because the inventors who developed these technologies were not only engineers, they were occultists, hermeticists, students of ancient traditions who understood something fundamental. Energy and consciousness are aspects of the same primordial substance. Tesla was a voracious reader of Vedic philosophy. He used the terms akasha and prana to describe what physics called the ether. In correspondence with Swami Vivekananda in 1896, Tesla speculated about the direct conversion of prana into measurable electromagnetic force. This was not a metaphor. Tesla was literally trying to build devices based on esoteric principles that go back thousands of years. John Worrell Keely was a member of Rosicrucian societies and studied the Pythagorean tradition of harmony and vibration in depth. His experiments with molecular disintegration through sound were based on the Hermetic belief that all matter is frozen vibration. Here is what schools do not teach. The scientific revolution of the 17th century was not a break with ancient knowledge. It was a hijacking of it. Francis Bacon, regarded as the father of the scientific method, was a Rosicrucian. Isaac Newton spent more time studying alchemy than physics. Robert Boyle was a member of the Invisible College, a hermetic group that became the Royal Society. These men did not reject esoteric knowledge. They translated it into materialist language and then closed the door behind them. True knowledge of energy has always been hidden because it was too powerful to democratize. Walter Russell, a sculptor and autodidact who published The Universal One in 1926, described a cosmological model based on octaves of vibration and undulating polarity that anticipated discoveries about cosmic plasma decades before they were confirmed. Russell claimed to have received this knowledge during a 39-day illumination experience. The scientific community ignored him completely, but when Nikola Tesla read the manuscript, he sent Russell a letter saying, "Lock your knowledge in a strongbox for 1,000 years. Humanity is not ready for it." Why did Tesla say that? Because he had learned the hard way. Free energy technology was not suppressed only by corporations. It was suppressed because it represented a fundamental paradigm shift that existing power structures could not absorb without self-destructing. The French occultist Eliphas Lévy wrote in 1855 about astral light, a universal substance that permeated all space and could be manipulated through trained will. Lévy was describing the same ether Tesla was trying to exploit technologically. The difference is that Lévy believed only prepared initiates should access this knowledge. Tesla believed it should be universal, but Tesla discovered that democratizing deep knowledge has consequences, and a humanity that still operates primarily through fear, greed, and violence, when given unlimited access to energy, does not become enlightened. It becomes dangerous. The guardians of hermetic knowledge have always known this. That is why initiation has always been gradual, tested, conditional. You do not hand fire to a child. You cannot separate technology from spirituality. The same principles that govern electromagnetism govern thought, emotion, and manifestation. Helena Blavatsky, founder of the Theosophical Society, wrote extensively about root races and past humanities that mastered natural forces only to self-destruct for lack of wisdom. These were not fairy tales. They were coded warnings about what happens when technological power exceeds spiritual development. The free energy inventors of the 19th century were old souls trying to bring premature knowledge to a civilization that had not yet done the inner work required to handle it wisely. And the forces that suppressed that knowledge were not just greedy men in corporate boardrooms. You can be sure of that. The question is not whether free energy is real. It is. The question is when we will be ready for it. That question is not about the future. It is about now. The same forces are still at work. Modern inventors who claim to have developed revolutionary technologies still disappear from the headlines, and humanity remains dependent on an energy system based on combustion, extraction, and centralized control. But something has changed. The internet has democratized information in a way J.P. Morgan could never have imagined. Documents that were locked in government archives for decades now circulate freely. Tesla's patents are available for anyone to read. Experiments can be replicated in garages and home labs. The knowledge is leaking out. If you understand how energy works, you understand how reality works. You realize that the same principles that govern electricity govern thought. That vibration is not only physical, it is mental. That you are not a passive consumer of energy, but an active transducer of it. The Hermetic principle of correspondence tells us the universe operates through repeating patterns at every scale. The same structure that allows Earth to function as a giant capacitor is the same structure that allows your mind to function as a generator of reality. Tesla understood this. Russell understood this. All the great visionaries understood that external energy and internal energy are aspects of the same thing. You have been trained to believe in scarcity, to believe that power comes from outside, from systems, from authorities, from people who control resources. You have been conditioned to be a consumer, not a creator. And that conditioning is the deepest and most effective layer of control. But conditioning can be undone, not through external revolution, but through internal transformation. The Hermetic Masters have always known this. Everything depends on your ability to understand that reality responds to consciousness, that vibration creates form, that focused thought is the most powerful technology that exists. And if you want to stop being a hostage to external energy systems, you need to master the inner principles that govern all energy. You need to understand the 7 laws that structure reality, not intellectually, but operationally. You need to learn to direct focus, to manipulate polarity, to work with rhythm and vibration, not as abstract concepts, but as practical tools. This is exactly what the Master Key offers. Concrete techniques for controlling and directing energy, the 7 hermetic laws unpacked with obsessive precision, and the complete map of how you become a conscious generator of reality instead of a passive consumer of it. May your power be in your hands. Thank you for watching.